where we're talking regarding the question of Palestine. The law office was established by Gilles Devers, my father. We are based in France, as you can guess from the accents, and in Europe. And so that's today maybe the point of view of someone based in Europe that I'm giving. And that has also some importance. The law office started to work on the question of Palestine in 2009, where actually we advised at that time the Palestinian government to recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC. That's work that we did, and I see that today online is Khaled Chouli, that I want to salute. I'm also thinking about Najet Radrich, who were really the partners of Gilles Devers when this initiative was taken. So I'm talking about the question of Palestine before you tonight, giving the point of view of a practitioner, not an academic, involved since more than 15 years. And after 15 years of working on the question of Palestine, I have the feeling that I'm in a paradoxical situation. On the one hand, the situation in Palestine has never been so concerning. There are many fundamental principles of international law that apply to the question of Palestine, and I'm sure that my colleagues will address them in details, but I'm thinking about the issue of human rights. I'm talking about individual rights, the right to life, prohibition of torture, right to food, and so on. Issues also of collective rights, such as the right to self-determination and independence, but also the prohibition of apartheid. There are also rules that are engaged that concerns the prohibition of the use of force under international law, the prohibition of acquiring a territory by use of force. There is also the question of international humanitarian law, the law of occupation, the law of armed conflict, and also the prohibition of mass crimes. And when I'm talking about mass crimes, I'm thinking, of course, about the issue of war crimes, but also crimes against humanity and the crimes of genocide. And I must say that all those principles are seriously violated in the question of Palestine to the extent that the very existence of the Palestinian people is currently under threat. So that's obviously, when you look at the applicable law and you look at the situation on the ground, a very dark picture currently for the Palestinian people. But at the same time, and that's maybe the other side of the work that we've been working on, after 15 years of work on the question of Palestine, I must say that the case of Palestine has never been so strong under international law. When we started to work on the question of Palestine in 2009, the only judicial determination that we had was the advisory opinion of the court of 2004 on the wall. And in that opinion, the court said already very relevant things for our work regarding the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people under international law, that the wall was against that right, the human rights obligations of Israel as the occupying power toward the Palestinian people, the applicability of the law of occupation, something that we tend to forget. But until 2004, there were many discussions among practitioners, scholars, as to whether Palestine was even occupied under international law. Because the Israeli government and the Israeli courts invented that theory that they would only apply IHL de facto, but not de jure. So that was a concession that they were making to the Palestinian people and not a legal obligation. So that's where we started, really from nowhere. When we advised the Palestinian government to recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC, at that time, everything was challenged, even the existence of the Palestinian people. And now in 2024, and even more now in 2025, we have Palestine that is recognized as a state, that has an observer status within the United Nations, that is a fully fledged member of many international organizations, including the International Criminal Courts, where it sits along with permanent members of the Security Council, such as France. There are also, we see that coming from the Palestinian government and the Palestinian people in general, more work to be more incentive or willingness to work on international law. So I'm thinking here about the second advisory opinion of the court of 2024, where the court ruled that the Israeli occupation is illegal, that it violates the right to self-determination. Then I will say a few words about that, but the court went very far on the content of the right to self-determination. The court also acknowledged that Israel was committing apartheid against the Palestinian people. And so when you look at the substantive development in terms of international law in relation to the question of Palestine, you see that for many years there were claims that international law is breached by the Israeli government. Now, they are not merely claims anymore. They are judicial determination that Israel violates the law of occupation, international humanitarian law, the right to self-determination, and that its occupation of Palestine is illegal. At the same time, as I said, and that was a long process, Palestine now is a fully fledged state member of the ICC. And in last November, the court, at the request of the prosecutor, decided to issue 2 international warrant arrests against the Prime Minister of Israel and the Minister of Defense. And when we started the work on the question of Palestine in 2009, I must say that at the beginning, people were even laughing at us because it seemed to be totally impossible for the International Criminal Court to get involved in the question of Palestine, first point. And then that actually someday the court would issue warrant arrest against Israeli leaders. So I think we'll talk about that tonight. There are many things that are dysfunctioning in the international law. There are many things that are dysfunctioning regarding the ICC, but for the first time in their history, for more than 70 years, the Palestinian people have finally an access to international criminal justice. They have a chance, before an independent and impartial court, to see the people that are committing crimes against them to be prosecuted and judged. And so I think that our work as lawyers and people active in the solidarity with the Palestinian people is to support that work that is done before the ICC, maybe to leave aside some of the critiques that we can have against the court, to focus really on what can be done in practice to strengthen the Palestinian cause. Regarding the work on the ICC, as I said, that's something that is very important for the Palestinian people. That's also something that is very important for the entire world, and that is without precedent, I think, in the history of humanity, because that's the end of Western impunity. Western powers, so far, were never tried before an international court or an international criminal court. We had that formula always that international criminal justice was for the people that lost the war, not the people who won them. In the case of Palestine, for the first time, you have a people that don't have the military advantage over its opponent that is able to access to international courts. And that's the first time also that you have leaders from the Western world that are on the bench of the accused before the international criminal courts. So I think that we are currently living a momentum in Palestine that is very similar to the momentum we lived when that was the question of decolonization. That's a major shift where you see international law becoming really universal and applicable to all people. And so I think that's the shift, that's the turning point. Now, regarding maybe a few things to think about when it comes to the question of Palestine. As I said, I'm not an academic, I'm a practitioner. And from my perspective, there are questions that are, there's no need to discuss anymore. For instance, the question of the state of Palestine. I know that in Europe, for instance, there are still many academic debates about whether Palestine is a state or not, whether you need the French government to recognize it or not. I think we are far beyond that, and there is no purpose in discussing that anymore. The state of Palestine, as I said, is observer at the UN. It is a fully full-fledged member of the ACC. So there is a state of Palestine. The question more is now about how to ensure that the Palestinian people and Palestinian individuals have an access to international courts, to courts in general, domestic courts also, to ensure that the violations they are victim of are prosecuted and punished. There may be, to finish my speech, three things that I would like to talk a little bit, being also in Europe. There's one, the first topic is the issue of trade with the settlements. I don't know what's the position of the Association of Asian States, Southeast Asian States, but in Europe, trade with the settlements is still allowed. The only thing that we have is the labeling of the product coming from the settlements. So if the product from the settlements are properly labeled as coming from the settlements in occupied Palestine, consumers have the right to buy them. And for me, that's the first topic on which we should be working on, which is not only an issue of diplomacy, sanction, or trade, that's an issue of human rights. Because the Palestinian people have the right to self-determination, and one of the components of that right is the right to permanent sovereignty over the natural resources. And so we need, I think, in Europe, for where I'm sitting, we need third states, non-European states, to explain to the European Union that they must enforce a prohibition on trade from the settlements. That's very important, that the European governments and leadership understand that's not possible to trade the natural resources of the Palestinian people without the consent of the Palestinian people. The second aspect also that I feel that is missing in discussions currently in Europe, and where we could receive assistance from non-European countries, is the issue of genocide in connection with the right to self-determination. In Europe, we are very much focused on the issue of individual human rights. And so, for instance, when you take the issue of genocide, you know that there is the material component, but also the intent component. There were very interesting submissions made by European states before the International Court in the Myanmar Rohingya case before the ICJ, where European governments intervened to explain to the court that the issue of intent must be understood in the light of human rights. But the states in Europe are only focusing on individual rights. We need to find a way to involve more the question of the right to self-determination. For me, that's very clear that the prohibition of genocide concerns national group, and the International Court of Justice was very clear about saying that the Palestinian people are a national group under the Genocide Convention, but they're also the beholder of the right to self-determination, and the right to self-determination protects the national unity of people, their right to exist as people. And in the case of Palestine, I think that's impossible to understand the ongoing genocide without making the connection with the right to self-determination. For many years, the Israeli leadership has been trying to violate the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people, to contest the existence of the Palestinian people as a people with the right to self-determination. Now they are committing a genocide because they want to suppress the Palestinian people, to suppress the issue of self-determination. And so for me, when you look at the issue of intent in the crime of genocide, you should also take into account the issue of the right to self-determination and find a way to link all the statements of Israeli officials denying the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people, denying the existence as a people, as a way to characterize the intent of the Israeli leadership to destroy the Palestinian people under the Genocide Convention. The last point maybe that I would like to address very quickly is the issue of assistance, the obligation of assistance that the Israeli government has as an occupying power in Palestine. As you know, there is a pending case before the International Court of Justice on the obligation of Israel of assistance, humanitarian assistance toward the Palestinian people, and the obligation of cooperation with international organizations and first states. That obligation to cooperate is mainly seen under the obligation to provide humanitarian assistance. But I think also that Israel has an obligation to cooperate with international organizations and third parties because of the agreements that were subscribed by the State of Palestine, and that Israel, as the occupying power, has the obligation to respect and to implement in the question of Palestine. I'll give you very quickly, and I will stop there, the example of the ICC. The state of Palestine is a state party to the ACC and has accepted the jurisdiction of the court. Israel is a third state toward the ICC. They refuse to recognize the jurisdiction of the court, and they don't accept or recognize the jurisdiction of the court. The absence of legal effects of the Roma Statute towards Israel is true as regards the territory of Israel. But when Israel is in the territory of Palestine, Israel, as the occupying power, is obliged by the international obligations subscribed by the State of Palestine. Under the law of occupation, the occupying power has the obligation to respect the laws into force in the occupied territories. And the ICC statutes, international agreements that were signed and ratified by the State of Palestine, are part of the law of the land in Palestine. And so for me, when, for instance, the Israeli government is denying the right of ICC investigators to access to Gaza, they are violating their rights, their obligations under AHL to respect the law that is applicable to occupied Palestine, and they are breaching the obligations to cooperate with international organizations. So to summarize, I think that the current situation has never been so serious for the question, the people of Palestine that are under an existential threat. At the same time, we have to work by every means to reinforce international law, because this is the best protection for the Palestinian people, and through the Palestinian people, the people of the rest of the world. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel, for this very insightful analysis. And of course, these are essential issues that we can practically be following and hope to work on. Thank you for your contribution. And now we could follow with Professor Susetio. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Anwar. And also good evening in Jakarta time for everyone. Good afternoon for other colleagues in other part of the world. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very happy to see all of you, even though just through a Zoom meeting. Uh, just a moment. Okay, my name is Heru Susetio. I'm a human rights lawyer and also a professor in international human rights law from Universitas Indonesia and based in Jakarta, Indonesia. Please let me display my PowerPoint. Sorry, can I use PowerPoint? Because
Sure.
yeah,
Give you access. Great.
yeah, I will be very quick, even though I have some PowerPoint. The idea is how to prosecute the Israel war crimes, genocides, and crime against humanity in any possible court in the world, in both either nationally or regionally or internationally. So this is not actually not that easy, but of course also is possible. So possible. So we must be clear and we must be positive that everything actually is possible. There is nothing is impossible actually, and so we do our best to reach that goal. First is genocide, because we believe that what had happened in Gaza until now is genocide, and no doubt about that, that a lot of genocide took place, not just since 2023, but before. And this month is the month of Nakba month, and we still remember the situation in 1948 up to now, until now, there are a lot of cases involving the extermination of the people, the expulsion, refugees problem, and also genocide, cultural genocide, physical genocide, cultural genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, and other things. So I have actually listing some crimes made by Israel in 1984 and 1988, 48. And at least there are seven international crimes. I'm sorry, this is some of the words still in Indonesian language. So the crime of aggression or crimes against peace, genocide and ethnic cleansing, followed by violation to Geneva Convention 1949, and then crimes against humanity, the war crimes, the state terrorism, and also crimes of apartheid, the crime of apartheid. And we have already seen with our own eyes that international law actually toothless or also powerless, because if we can have a look at what had happened in the General Assembly in the UN, the New York, even there's some things about the membership, the permanent membership of the Palestine.